Thank you. I hear I gotta take that thing out. I gotta take the brines out. How do you mute it?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
All right, I can hear you. It's 7:30, but we are still one shy of quorum. I see Ty, Chris, and me. So there's Nikki. Okay, cool. We have and start the meeting. Welcome everyone to the regular open meeting of the May 6th, 2025 Board of Trustees meeting. We had our executive session. Sorry, it ran long, and appreciate your patience. And no decisions were made there. And Macy, would you give the roll call for this meeting, please?
Of course. It's 7:31 p.m. Mayor Billy,
Yep, I'm here.
Mayor Pro Tem Sterling,
Yeah, here.
Trustee Larson,
Here.
Trustee Maris,
Here.
Trustee Ty,
Here.
Trustee Miller.
Here.
Okay, I'd like to note for the record that Trustee Corvalon will be joining us this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. With that, we'll go right into our consent agenda. We have 5 items on the consent agenda. And if you have any questions on those, John is most likely who you're asking.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Second.
All right, Nicole, second. Go ahead, Macy. Can you call the vote?
Trustee Maris,
Yes.
Mayor Billy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Sterling,
Yes.
Trustee Larson,
Yes.
Trustee Ty,
Yes.
Trustee Miller.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've been yapping away on mute. I apologize. With that, we'll go into our first informational item on the 2026 budget. John and Rita.
Well, Mayor and Trustees, I wanted to welcome you to budget season. We are getting an early start this year, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but mostly I think it's driven by 2 things. One, there is a December 15th deadline to finish the budget, and 2, I would really like to set ambitious goal for us that we finish all practical work about the budget by Thanksgiving. And I think that has a couple of benefits for us. A, we're not going to have to stress in December about it getting done. And B, it just makes sure that we have a little bit of runway if we run into an issue that we need to deal with where we're not like right up against the deadline. So in my staff report, I kind of detailed this process. Rita's also here if you have questions for her. One of the things that Rita did this year that's really cool is she was able to get the auditor here very early this year. And that likely means that we'll have the audit completed in May, which is really cool. That doesn't usually happen for towns. Our deadline is July 31st for that. So we're way ahead of schedule there, which means that she was able to create the planning worksheets that we use for the department heads much earlier than normal. They all have their department head kind of planning sheets for their budgets, which gives them several months to be thinking about their goals for their department, what they're trying to accomplish, and all of that. I will be working with them throughout the year in our one-on-ones to develop those budgets and make sure they're in line with our priorities and goals as we've kind of stated them and as we will state them moving forward. And I think that we're in good shape for as far as that goes. I'm also going to be working very closely with the DDA. They're the other budget that you guys have to approve. Their budget is separate, but similar to yours. It has the same deadline and the similar process. And as you know, we've been talking about that with the MOU and bylaws that they're considering for adoption. So that should happen. But I think in general, we're still going to have that same process where you're reviewing it. They're going to work with Rita and myself and make sure we're all aligned. And then that will be approved whenever our budget hearing is. In my staff report, excuse me, I outlined some key meetings and work sessions that I think we should hold as a part of this process. The first one is a new one. It would happen on August 5th, and this would be an audit presentation and mid-year finance review. We did not do that last year, but I think that having the auditor talk to you about their findings is a good plan. Excuse me. It also gives us an opportunity to tell you more about where we are from a financial standpoint and like talk a little bit about our priorities for the next year. Apologize. On August 12th, I have basically planned for 2 work sessions here. I don't think they need to be tremendously long, but I think it would help us just having them just 2 sessions just to talk about things a little bit. The first one would be really focused. We talk about revenue projections, department needs, and strategic direction. And this would be the opportunity to really be thinking about board goals as they've been elucidated. We still have our strategic plan that we need to do, and that will happen in the near future here. And so we can kind of talk through those goals for next year based on the actual financial realities that we know we should have and should be able to project at that point. On September 16th, I have just a progress update here just to talk about fiscal insights that we have, start making sure the calendar is correct, and look at any big issues that may impact the budget. One thing that we know we are going to need to be talking about and thinking about is the new property tax rules that will go into effect this year. We won't know that by September, but I think like we may have heard some things, and I think that's one of the things that we just want to plan for that may be kind of a wild card in this situation. On October 14th, I have another work session. Oh, sorry.
John, would you mind throwing up that as a visual, just because there may be
Sure.
people on here that don't have the document?
You guys see it?
Now we do.
So October 14th, this would be the second work session.
Thank
This
you.
would be really looking at the capital projects, the refined department budgets, and allocations for different projects and so forth. The department heads will attend that meeting, so you can talk to them about their budgets and anything you have that might need to change at that point. October 21st, pre-draft review. This would be kind of final adjustments and not fully final draft, but getting close to that point and making sure we're dialed in with your priorities and everything is correct from the board's perspective. November 4th, if you remember, we have a 2-part process for our budget. So we do a formal presentation, and then there is another meeting later after all the public notice that happens. So I'm planning right now on having the formal budget presentation on November 4th. That would be the delivery of that proposed budget. And then kind of tentatively planning that November 18th, we could hold that public hearing and potential adoption. So that is fluid. You know, we have until the 15th, but if we plan for that November date and we can hit it, it would mean that December, you know, the stress of that is completely off the table. Just a little bit about the budget, like the elements of the process that we should be considering. We will have this new strategic plan that will really be updated to ensure that our work is really aligned to the community goals and board direction. That's something that will be very important this year. We are working to improve our public engagement around this process. We have our website and newsletter and our town talks, which we have been doing, and those have been a really successful way to talk to people. We want to make sure that as many people participate in this process as possible. And so that's something that we're wanting to incorporate every step of the way here. We will be redesigning our budget book this year to comply with ADA standards in Colorado that are for accessibility, digital accessibility. That's going to be a relatively big project for us, but it will modernize and upgrade our budget book as well. So that should be a good thing for the community. And then in terms of staff collaboration, we're just going to be really focusing on our teamwork as a staff, working with Rita, the department heads, and myself, and then engaging with you all as we move forward. I think one thing I'd like to note is there is a strong possibility that our budget situation from last year continues into this year, we should see some improvements, but that's probably a process that goes into place over time. And so as we get more knowledge about our financials moving forward, one thing to remember is sales tax for us, we get reported 2 months in arrears. So we're kind of looking at old data all of the time, but by the end of May, we should have a good idea of how we're trending, and then we'll see how the summer goes. But that's something that we'll really want to collaborate on and really be thinking about as we move into next year and as we continue to stabilize our budget and make it resilient. I have a couple questions here. I wanted to make sure that you are okay with this general schedule, especially with trying to get it done by Thanksgiving if we can, and then adding those 2 work session dates. I want to make sure that there were no topics or anything you'd like to discuss as we kind of move into the August, September, October timeframe. And then if there's any other changes that we need to consider just moving forward, just to make sure this is a good process for everyone.
The calendar looks great. The only question I had was, I'm thinking November 4th is that election day for any off year stuff for the county, and does that matter for our meetings? Jennifer?
Do you typically hold the meeting on election day if it occurs on election day?
We generally reschedule that one to a second, to a
Okay.
different.
I'll modify that.
I don't know how much this particular election matters. I'm just dawned on me.
I'll change that to whatever the rescheduled date is.
Thank you. Any other questions on the calendar, folks? The schedule?
None here. Nope, this looks good.
Great. And you said, did you have another primary question, John? You said you had a couple questions.
I just want to make sure Rita's here too. If you have questions for her, we added a couple of meetings, but I think ultimately it should be a pretty manageable year. It is a challenging task to come into a town and immediately learn the budget and start making changes or choices about it. And this year, I think Rita and I have really built a good rapport, and we have a good, working background of where we are and what needs to happen next. So I am really hoping that we show you a great process this year and that we get it done, and it's an enjoyable experience for us all as much as budgeting can be.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Rita, any comments?
No, I can't wait.
Yeah.
It can only improve, right? Last year was a little rough, so I think it'll be better.
It will be. I like the early start. Any questions for Rita now that we hear her?
No, thank you guys.
Mhm.
Yes,
Thank
thank you
you.
both. Well, if there's nothing else, anything else from us, John, or should we move on? Can we
No,
move
sir.
on?
Thank you.
Great,
I'll
thank you.
go ahead and
then-
sign off, though. I just wanted to be available for budget stuff here. So good night, everybody.
Thank you so much.
You
Good night,
bet.
Rita.
Bye-bye.
Take care. So with that, we'll go to our one and only action plan of the day, the downtown sub-area plan. And Britt?
Yeah, so tonight we have the final downtown sub-area plan for you all. The downtown sub-area plan, just to remind you all, establishes a future vision and outlines objectives and strategies for the town, DDA, property, and business owners. There were several different engagement opportunities. There was a community meeting back in September 2024. This group presented to the board in March and May to kind of discuss cost and scope and then update on progress. October, they went to the PC, and then there were several meetings between March and January that were held with the DDA to assist with the final draft. At the PC meeting on April 23rd, the PC did recommend or did approve the Nederland downtown area sub-area plan. Next steps would really be that this sub-area plan would be ratified by you all tonight. The Board of Trustees oversees the town budget and shall use this plan to prioritize funding for downtown improvements. The Nederland DDA is also using this as their plan of development moving forward and to allocate their funding for their annual budget. There will continue to be public outreach and transparency efforts and future updates and monitoring of this plan. So that's really all that I have for you guys tonight, but let me know if you have any questions.
Any clarifying questions for Britt? If not, we will get. Go ahead.
I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment, but one thing I saw in the height, maximum building height, I thought we had capped at 35 feet, but I noticed in one of the things it had 43.
Yeah, so this is more, oh, go ahead, John.
No, you go, you got it.
Yeah, I was going to say this is more so just like a recommendation or things they're offering in regards to like the overlay district, which is something we've already started discussing with the Planning Commission. But yes, our current height is 35 feet across the board in every zone.
Okay, so the 43 is just like board illustrated, but like I don't get
one of the things to remember, like in the comprehensive plan, is it comes from recommendations of people looking at the district and the community engagement. And so it's something that the next step for the PC, and that's something that they discussed at their last meeting, is the opportunity to change the underlying zoning in the downtown district, or to potentially add design guidelines. And that work would need to happen before that recommendation could occur. And so I think that what they're saying is that would be almost like, think about like we probably wouldn't exceed this height, but you already have the other height, and that's something the policy work still needs to occur.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback on that because it's something I've been harping on with John and Billy for a long time now. That everything in these plans is just suggestions, nothing's codified. And if we want to have more control about the town and how it gets developed, it would behoove us all to go through the sub-area plan and cherry pick things that we think are worthy of coding. And understanding what the overlay district means. It's another district just on First Street, the business area, that we can create specific codes just for the redevelopment of First Street if it should happen. And this is unrelated to anything that Ron would submit or anything. It's just how we envision the town. And if we don't codify it, then none of it matters. Nothing said in these comp plans, sub-area plans, nothing matters. It's just an idea. So I think I'm happy the Planning Commission's talking about it, and I'm looking forward to this getting bounced back to us so that we can have a robust conversation about what we think is worthy of codifying. First, we have to create this district, and I'm all in favor for it. And the flex zone in the over in the what you call it, the Wolf Tongue Mine Zone, that would be a new district that we would also create. And then we would create in those districts, how do we envision that? What does that mean? What are the zoning changes we would do? And I'm looking forward to this. I don't know if it's going to happen in my tenure here on the board, the way things move, but I think it's super important, because if you look at the code right now, there's a lot of things that somebody could come in and build that aren't what we envision for this community. So anyway, that 42 is their recommendation for the First Street. And I think they also had recommendations of third floor being set back to create that extra height, and then roofs being pitched and a different height if roofs are pitched. And they have a lot of, I actually enjoy the sub-area plan quite a bit, and the First Street overlay. I think they had some good ideas. So I think it will make our job easier if we choose to codify stuff.
Cool. And then the other question I had was the Wolf Tongue. So there's a bunch of stuff in there for the Wolf Tongue, but they're cutting it off halfway through the property, right? And so like in the comp plan, we've got the Wolf Tongue is all one zone. This is half, not even half, like it's a third of the Wolf Tongue property. And so just questioning, like, are we considering recommendations of split zoning the Wolf Tongue property, or is it just because we've got, I don't know, that's my question.
That's a policy question that needs to be determined. And typically what the process would be is this is like usually there's some nuance here, but in theory, what should happen is PC kind of takes it up from their expertise kind of perspective, and then that would come back to the board. But that could be something that changes. This is just recommendations based on the studies and the engagement, but the actual reality of what happens could be quite different. And I think that really gets to like the strategic direction of the Board of Trustees and some of the work that we have yet to do this year.
Right, but is the recommendation of the sub-area plan?
I think it's responsive to the fact that part of the lot is developed and part of it isn't, and that there is a need that the undeveloped part of that lot, there may be different needs there than there are on the developed part, but I don't think that that's the only way that it could be. So I think that what they're kind of responding to where development is, in this kind of balance between preservation of more natural space and preservation of more urban space, I think. But I think that that's something that's a decision, like Tanya said, for people who live here and have expertise in our community.
Right. Yeah. I'm just trying to get clear on, like, is there a recommendation to zone that Wolf Tongue property in multiple, like in one of their future land use maps, they've got even, the parts that are included inside the sub-area boundary, which is not all. They have part of it as flex and part of it as open space.
Yeah, I think. Oh, go ahead.
And so I'm just wondering if that's just
Is
kind
it-
of trying to understand the recommendation.
Is it following the NDDA borders?
I think essentially that was what the scope of the
Yeah.
project was.
So that's something of a nuance, Luke, is that those are following the boundaries of the NDDA and what is considered the sub-area plan. And so while it doesn't line up,
Even
Well,
within that, that's what I'm saying, is even within that, they're also splitting that property into different zones.
Do you know what page
Yeah,
you're
but the
on?
thing with
I'd
the
like to see
flex
that.
zoning, oh, sorry.
Page 63, figure 13.
Okay.
With the flex zoning, it's important to note that what you're saying is that there's a number of compatible uses that could happen. It doesn't mean they're all going to happen in one exact space. And so I think the thing that I'm feeling a little sensitive about is to say they're making a recommendation that they split the zoning. I'm thinking what you're seeing is that there's different uses that could be appropriate for that lot, and that it may be, and that's one of the benefits of an overlay district, is that there's really two options here, right? If there's actually three. So what you could do is you could change all of the zoning in the commercial district, in the downtown district, and say all of the zoning in this area has to comply to this standard. Or like Tanya suggested, you could say on First Street, this is our overlay district and these rules apply. And typically you use an overlay district for a public benefit, like for the public space to like have a certain functionality or appearance or something. And the third possibility is the design standards, which some communities use typically for historic preservation, but for other architectural purposes in areas like this. And what you can do is say, like, these elements need to be included in the design. And so one I'm familiar with is like says something to the effect of there needs to be pedestrian level architecture that really activates the streetscape or something like that. And that's where some of these things about building heights come into play. And so I think what the real work is at this point is that we have this recommendation that there's these appropriate uses downtown. And what Planning Commission interrogated at their last meeting and needs to continue talking about is whether one of those options is more appropriate, the whole district, part of the district, or an overlay district. And the thing about an overlay district is it may encompass more than one zoning area. So it could encompass like a residential area and a commercial area where there's some similar standards for both, or like use tables for both. And I think what would happen in the case of the Wolf Tongue, if that was included, is that there may be something like that in place where there is, discussion of compatible uses and making sure that all that fit together properly. So I'm not sure what that plan is saying is there's a recommendation that there's a split zoning, but that there may be, in terms of highest and best use, different parts of that property where different things are prioritized, I guess. And I don't know if that fully answers your question, but that's kind of how Planning Commission has been discussing it.
And I think on all the places, in the sub-area plan, when they showed those extra, that Wolf Tongue part of the Wolf Tongue property for the downtown area, I think it always did. I mean, you're pointing it out. I think it always did kind of cut it in half there, because actually that's shown not just on page 63, but it's shown on several pages where they, kind of just include up until that one spot. They don't go farther. And
Right.
it's good. It's a good point. It's a good point. But I guess John kind of answered that, the overlay district.
I mean, I think it's
covers
kind of
one,
clear.
covers.
There, one of the maps indicates like current zoning shows it all as one, even though it's cut off. It just shows it as all industrial, and then their proposed zoning shows it split into park and flex, and so that's makes it pretty clear there. That's what they're suggesting. So,
and you guys could give direction to the PC as well. That's within your role to say, we want to consider XYZ option for that entirety of that lot or something like that. That's 100% within your authority as a Board of Trustees to your advisory body, the Planning Commission.
yeah, and I think it makes sense it's a big property, so I think it makes sense to consider different zoning applications for parts of that lot.
John, the Planning Commission will discuss it and then bring the recommendations to us, and then we can have these big discussions about it, and then it can bounce back and forth a little bit, but ultimately, in the end, it's us that will make these choices.
Yeah. In this case, they're just making a recommendation to you about from the expertise level of that they're working, but that it's ultimately your decision.
Luke, are you looking at page 33? Because that's what I'm looking at now, where they have it as a purple downtown flex. And you're right, it doesn't take the whole property, which is nice. But the whole property is currently zoned industrial. So that is just something we have to talk about if we want to keep it all industrial or do half of it flex and half of it conservation or parks. It's their property, but you said it's hard to change zoning, I think, on that without a big discussion. But I think page 33 has a beautiful map of some good ideas that they're discussing.
Britt and John, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's sort of dependent on how those parcels are broken up, correct? Like you can't take a landowner's parcel and say, okay, half of this is going to be X and the other half is going to be Y. It's dependent upon the boundaries of that parcel.
Yeah.
And I think we want to, you can rezone property, like you have that authority, but if you rezone something to where their use is non-conforming, then that's going to be a conflict unless there's something planned there. So that's one of the things we need to talk about.
And that's not something that any of these recommendation maps actually parse out. They don't have the actual parcel boundaries. And so that's just we need to be very sensitive to that.
This is kind of the wouldn't it be cool if kind of idea piece, and then now we have to go do the elbow grease work and make this, figure out what actually might be possible.
Have for the Wolf Tongue property, have they seen this? And I would imagine that flex zoning idea would seem appealing to them as a landowner. I know it would to me. I'm just curious if you guys have talked about it at all.
They've shown up to a couple of planning commission, not all of the property owners, but I know Greta's been on a few. And, I think there was a couple of meetings where we kind of had to explain that, but after we explained it, it seemed, very open to it because it just increases the potential value and or what can be used for that property.
Right, because right now it's just industrial, so.
Right.
You also look at page 35, there's a really interesting objective specific to the Wolf Tongue site. It is probably one of our most historically significant sites in Nederland, and there is a recommendation that we look at the creation of a new historic district, which can be used to access funding, which is a really cool thing. You know, it's a really good way to merge kind of commercial or industrial uses with preservation, kind of to use preservation to support those needs. And so that's one of the things that they talk about as an objective of looking at this, is looking at how we might be able to access those dollars to support the Wolf Tongue property owners.
Real quick, these page numbers are kind of confusing. Are you talking about the page numbers of the packet or page numbers of the actual, just the
Sorry.
specific?
Of the
That's all right, 'cause-
Yeah,
For me,
okay.
it's 37.
Yeah, he's talking about
Yeah,
page number of the sub area plan, which I think is page 67 of the packet.
Yeah, it makes so much more sense.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay. Gotcha.
Sorry
Yeah,
about
for
that.
me, I'm looking
I
at
was
the
trying to find it, but I couldn't get good page numbers consistently. Okay, thank you.
packet. But yeah, this is
Yeah.
confusing because for me, it's 37 on the actual plan. Let me packet.
One other thing I'd just like to highlight for you that is something that has had some good conversation around it is the circulation and parking plan piece of this. Planning Commission has spent a while talking about parking, and they've spent some good effort doing that. And one of the big elements of this that was really combined with the multimodal plan is looking at that traffic circulation.
She's still waiting on Trinity's parents.
Okay, Billy, you need to mute yourself.
Sorry.
So you can see this is on page 40 of the plan, and I don't know what the packet number is, I'm sorry, but you can kind of see some of the circulation that's suggested here. And what they're really trying to do is promote movement through downtown that eliminates some of the queuing issues that we already have, and really making sure that people move appropriately through the downtown and access it appropriately. Some of the parking stuff, there's parking in places the town owns, and those are also just recommendations of places where we might improve our parking and things like that. So I just wanted to note that. There's also a trail, sidewalks, and safe crossings plan here, and I think this is really also well aligned with the recommendations of the multimodal plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, my only gripe there was kind of the same as the multimodal plan. Like they talked a lot about, pedestrian and bike transportation, but then all the recommendations were car centric, which I kind of see the same thing here, but it's not too surprising.
Yeah, I think that's another one where local experts can take this and shine it up just a bit, because I think
it's just like it's identified as like one of the goals, in all the messaging, and then when it comes to the actual plans, it's like, but again, like traffic control is definitely one of our primary things to focus on.
I think they see it as a safety issue. Like the biggest one is that people are unsafe on bikes and walking. And it's so easy to say highway is the dangerous thing. And so I think what we need to do, like you said, is really build out some strategy about what that actually means to prioritize pedestrian and bicycle access to downtown.
Yeah. But I do think their circulation recommendations could be really helpful.
Well, now we have that landmark in the roundabout, the new dinosaur. So we have to make sure people see that.
Yeah, why didn't they just put that guy in the roundabout? That would have been so cool.
Well, does anyone, are we done discussing? Are you make a motion?
Yeah,
or
no, we're not. I'm muted. Any clarifying questions? I was going to go to public comments. Now let's go to public comment. I see DS. Go ahead and identify yourself and your relationship to town, and you get 3 minutes.
It's Ron Mitchell. I'm just observing. That's all.
Oh, you raised
Thought
your
you
hand,
wanted
Ron.
to
Okay.
comment. Thought you wanted to comment. Oh, never mind.
Oh, David. Hi, David. That's DS.
Yeah, I thought Ron
Okay.
wanted to comment.
I changed
Okay,
my
no
mind.
worries. If either of you wants to make a comment, you are welcome to.
Nothing here, thanks.
Okay, cool. Thanks, David. Thanks, Ron. Any other folks from the public want to make a comment? Hearing none, we'll bring it back to the board for final discussion and a motion. Any more thoughts? And
I move to approve Resolution 2025-09, adopting the downtown sub-area plan.
the motion?
Second,
The motion is second. Just want to stop it for a minute and say anything folks want to discuss before we move ahead. Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and Macy, can you call the vote?
Trustee Miller,
Yes.
Trustee Ty,
Yes.
Trustee Larson,
Yes.
Mayor Billy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Sterling,
Yes.
Trustee Maris,
Yes.
and Trustee Corvalon.
yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate that, and look forward to PC doing their work with the overlay district and seeing that soon, hopefully. Kind of estimate hopefully within one or two of their meetings we should be hopefully able to bring it back. With that, we will move to our one and only discussion item of the evening, the structured water and wastewater PIF fees.
Well, Mayor
policy.
and Board, staff has been working really hard on our kind of fee structures and our PIFs. As you know, PIF fees are a capital investment in our system, and they pay for the impact of new connections or for expanded connections to the system. We have a very small system, and one of the important things about water and wastewater funds in Colorado is that they need to be paid for by user fees. Ours is a little unique in that it does get some sales tax support, but by and large, it should run like a business. That's why it's called an enterprise fund. So what we are presenting tonight is a policy question for you, and that is, should we develop a structured payment policy for PIF fees? We have done this in the past with limited success, and I think largely because it hasn't been a structured program. But what we could do is think about a way that we might structure payments over some period of time or allow them later in the process to give developers easier time to kind of manage their cash flows as we go. Our code right now requires all PIF fees to be paid at the time that building permits are issued. And so that's something that Andrew Bliss and Britt, who are both here with us tonight, if you have questions for them about this process, manage. When it's time for the permits, then they need to pay. If they haven't paid, then they don't get permits. That's kind of an important thing for us because we need to have a trigger for what happens if you don't pay. And it's pretty clear right now, if you don't pay, you don't get permits. There are some communities that do it a little bit differently where they'll give it at certificate of occupancy. And there are some communities also that will create payment plans over a period of time. However, if we were to do something like that, we need a very strong legal contract with folks for that purpose. And we also should likely charge interest for that because we are taking on risk in that situation. We wanted to bring this forward because we do know that our PIFs are expensive, and it is something that we hear frequently that we have, that these are a challenge for people. And if there is something here that we can do that preserves our need to take care of our system and make sure that toilets continue to flush and water continues to come into your homes, then it's something that we thought would be a good question for the board. The way we see it, this is aligned with your current strategic objectives to at least explore this, which is 1.1, managing growth and infrastructure, and 3.2, expand housing access and affordability. We've kind of thought through like 3 potential ways this could happen. One is that we don't change anything, just status quo. We just leave it at building permit, which is probably the safest thing for us in terms of getting the money that we need. We could allow an installment plan over 3 to 5 years with some sort of formal agreement and maybe like a lien on the property or something like that, although, you know, that's not a sure path of repayment, which is important to note. And then finally, we could do something where there's some sort of use-based tiered or targeted deferral of PFAs, and that would be something where we would develop like criteria with the board about how you would give those deferrals. One thing I did want to note, and it is in my staff report, you already have the ability under section 1359A to authorize delayed utility fee payment in cases of unusual or extreme hardship. So that is something that is within your authority. You also have the ability currently to look at utility fees in the same way. And we do have a program that we're working to bring forward to you to formalize an agreement. So if people are in arrears on their payments, that we have a formal agreement that will allow them to catch up. And that's something you'll see soon. This policy question, though, is do you want to look at alternatives to our current payment schedule? If you do, the next step is the staff will work together. We're going to put together a full alternative analysis and give you more details about some of the challenges we've had in the past and what might be possible in the future. That team likely would be Attorney Madsen, Andrew Bliss, who's again with us tonight, Janet, who is our utility billing clerk, and then Rita would be involved in that too. And we would come up with maybe a couple alternatives of how this could work. That is pretty much my staff report. As I noted, Britt and Andrew are here. If you have questions for me or them, we are happy to take them.
Any clarifying questions for Jenna?
How much staff effort do you think it would take? You know, you mentioned things like the lawyer, the town attorney, which obviously has a cost. And
I think we could build a program at the staff level in 10 to 15 hours of time. We need a couple of meetings, then we would need to draft whatever would be looked at. And then Attorney Madsen would have to look at the contracts and things like that. So there's probably a few hours there. I do think that the biggest challenge would be is the longer these things go, the harder the capacity would be. And then we have to track it down. And if there's, you know, you never know about changes or something. So you have to make sure people know about it. That would be my biggest concern about a longer program, is just our capacity to manage that over time.
I have a question. A couple years back, we, I think it was Dynamoves came and asked for a amortization of the PIF fees, and we gave it to them. Do we know what the terms were for that and how that's going with the payments? I mean, I'm sure it's fine. It's going good because they still own their building. But
I would say that one of the things we want to do is really, if this is something we want to continue, is come up with some formal criteria for how it would work. I think in the past, there have been kind of one-off deals, and I think we may not want to discuss individual users in a public forum like this, but I think the biggest thing is that we just want to make sure it's a fair and consistent process for everyone that we can manage effectively. You do, like I noted, though, you do have the ability, if somebody came to you and said, we have a hardship, you could right now, using your authority, give some sort of deferral. And I think that would be something, if that happens, that what we would do is create a one-off agreement with our attorney just to cover that eventuality. So that is something that does presently exist in code.
I mean, I think it makes more sense to just hash it all out now so that it doesn't have to come to the board every time somebody has a hardship.
Yeah, the one thing I think about is just like, you know, affordable housing projects, you know, big projects, you know, preschools, like those are the those are the ones who I think we're just, deciding, do we just say you got to pay the whole thing up front or not? I mean, the value of this kind of structured payment schedule is that it could ease that startup cost. I'm not decided one way or the other, to be honest, but I guess one question I have is like on the tracking, you said like the keeping track of it over time might be a unknown burden or kind of a like, what do you think about it? Like, or, because you did this in Idaho Springs, right?
Yes, sir. And I think the thing we would want is a really good system. We use what's called multi-fund accounting software to use our utility bills. And basically that just allows us to manage all our different funds. And it gives us the ability to manage these utility payments that folks have, like your monthly bill. That's how Janet manages it on her end. And we have been making some improvements to that work. But one of the things that, I think it's just like new modern technology, tracking PIF fees that have been paid and all of these things. That work just needs to continue. And I think what we would do is build a system for that if this is something we want to do, and just make sure that it's really built into our process. But that is something that we would weigh at the staff level, is just making sure nothing would fall through the cracks.
So you're saying it would have to be a new system we develop for the town. So there'd be some cost to the town to develop that system.
It could be. I do think our current software is capable of handling it, but we may have to slightly reprogram it just to add the ability to track. And we can always use a spreadsheet if we had to. I'm not sure what the actual, I guess one of the things is how many people would actually be coming after this. If we're managing 100+ of these, then that might be one thing. If it's like 2 or 3 at a time, it's a different situation.
Right, which actually comes back to something Billy pointed out. He talked about his thought of the type of person who this would be most useful for, be like, the preschool or a large affordable housing project. Some of these larger things where the PIF fees are a very significant chunk of change, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. But those are probably the ones that we as a board might have the most interest in actually having a say over versus having some blanket policy. And it's the type of thing that we wouldn't be seeing on a regular basis.
It also opens up the possibility that if you have an agreement that PIF fees can be paid over a period of time, you could say, well, in that period of time, that housing is deed restricted without us investing $1 in it. And so it's a way that you might be able to accomplish other goals that you have without a huge capital investment, without losing that PIF either.
That's
I guess my gut thought on this is it sounds like, it sounds like a good project. Sounds like a good idea. It also sounds like we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't really exist currently. It's not really something that's like a critical need. It's not something we've had people banging down the door on. So the biggest part of it to me is this a good use of our limited staff time, particularly yours and town attorneys and Andrews and Britt's, or the Britt or Macy you said was going to do it, but limited staff time to pursue this, which isn't needed right now. You're muted, Nicole.
Yeah, I mean, Chris brings up a good point in terms of the impact that this is having. I think we've had a few high profile developments that, this has come up, and so it might be like front and center right now. I guess I'd be interested in staff's viewpoint as to how critical they see this in our overall, all the goals and things, and we're about to go into strategic planning and everything. Like, where does this fall in terms of priority?
Well, Britt and Andrew, maybe you guys are the best people to answer that. What are your thoughts, Britt?
I mean, I get this question a lot, but usually it's from individual, homeowners that are wanting to build ADUs, or I have gotten this question a lot now with affordable housing. I guess I don't have an opinion either way. to be honest. I think it's nice to know that the board's open to it though. But I can say it hasn't always been the smoothest process for people paying or having this structure.
It hasn't been smooth. Well, because
I'm trying to be across the board or not specific, but it doesn't always work out as smooth with payments is what I'm saying.
Okay.
We would need a better legal structure for
Ye-
protecting the town.
Yeah, like I would be very open to that, I think being beefed up so that people could have this opportunity and utilities would feel comfortable with it and the board would feel comfortable with it and staff would, and we would know it's an option, but right now I don't know that everyone is comfortable with it. Is that vague enough and specific enough?
It's clear as mud. It's
Okay.
lovely. Thank you.
I hear that a lot.
It's okay. No, and it's okay if it's a little ambiguous because it could be that yes, we do get, frequent questions about it, and it would be nice to have a structure in place. And, we don't have that. So that's a perfectly acceptable answer too. Andrew, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I'm in favor of exploring it. I'm skeptical on how it could work, but
Okay.
I want to keep an open mind. I just based on kind of my experience with existing agreements and kind of the history of payments and talking to other communities, I'm skeptical, but I do think it's something that the town is criticized about and should look into further. Now, whether is it an open-ended something that we look at it open-ended, or do we just use kind of the first proposal to hash it out with this board? I could go either way, but I think at some point it is something worth exploring more and just making sure that our code, our staff, and our board are all aligned with the community.
And John, your thoughts on it?
I think it's something that I wanted to discuss with you. I think the options are we could put this in the parking lot for the moment as we kind of work on the strategic plan and know that you do have the authority right now if somebody does have a hardship that they can bring that to you.
Yeah.
I think that is maybe not a terrible option, and we could look at this as we go through that planning effort and put this in our parking lot to discuss as a goal for the next 2 years. That would be one option, or if you guys want us to look into this further, I don't think it would take us very long to, kind of do alternatives analysis on it and just see. But I don't think it would be, I guess in terms of burning priorities, it's not necessarily the biggest one right now.
Yeah. Okay.
I like that it's not the biggest priority. We'll talk about in the future. I think it's a good idea. I think there's ways legally to make, if people don't pay, we take their property, there's a lien on the property. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that we'll make sure that people pay eventually. And then, as you said, there'd be an interest charge, so it's cheaper to pay at once. That's a huge incentive. And while we're on the topic, I would love, when we come back in the future to discuss this, to bring back the idea of small square footage homes and lowered PIF fees to encourage those ADUs that people want to build. I know we talked about it. I don't think we codified anything about that. Am I right?
Yeah, we're still waiting on.
Oh, we're waiting on the rate study.
Yeah, they haven't given us the final report yet, but Andrew Bliss has been working on that, and Andrew, I forget what he said when we'll have it. I'm sorry.
Friday.
Okay, so yeah, we can bring that back.
Again, that's not urgent, but I do know it's on the topic where people said, I would build an ADU to rent out to my friend, kid, whatever, but I don't want to pay $30,000 for pithy or whatever it is for, so I think that's worthy of a conversation. That would be a way to bring in more housing in the community. So, and then, yeah, I'm fine with putting this on the back burner, but I am in support of some kind of policy for it, not just for big developers, but a lot of people might struggle with it. The cost of building so high right now.
Well, what if I put this on the agenda for strategic planning, that we should discuss our water wastewater rate study fees as a part of our goals? And then in the meantime, if something does happen where there is a hardship, they are welcome to come to you and make that request. Are you guys all comfortable with that in general?
Do we have to go to public comment
Oh,
for
you
this?
do. Yeah, sorry.
Mayor
Yes,
Billy?
we do. Thank you very much. I will open up public comment. If anyone has a comment on this subject, go ahead and identify yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, can I go?
You may.
Hi, everybody. I know some of you, thank you, Mayor and the BOT for considering this. So I guess my wife and I are in the case of not really important. I get it when you're discussing a lot of the really big projects. So the current PIV fees, and thank you very much, Jonathan, for actually putting this on the agenda. I actually really appreciate that. And I looked at the Raftelis study. The current PIV fees are $46,000 for water and $21,000 approximately for sewer. That's for 3/4 inch. And so the study from 2021 advocated a phase in over the last 3 or 4 years. And so these fees, that's mainly due to the water. That's a 86% increase in 3 or 4 years. Just for some context, we bought our property in 2021, I believe, and unfortunately, I guess we weren't involved enough to know about the trajectory of these fees. And I'm really curious about, where they're going from here. So also being able to finance the PIF fees would, be able to lock in a current price if there is no waiver or grants for hardships. If From what I'm hearing, that is an option. I guess I just don't know what qualifies for a hardship. Similar to, I don't know what would qualify somebody for financing. I would really appreciate, obviously, structured rules around that, but I understand there's not a lot of buildable lots in town still, as far as I know. It's a small town. So I can understand why spending time to have one rule for everything doesn't maybe make a lot of sense. But I did put together quite a few questions after looking at the Raftelis study. The Raftelis, their model talks about proportionality, where it's not, they don't really have a definition of proportionality. They just use 1 over the number of accounts times the estimate of the value of the currently existing infrastructure. And that's how this number is arrived at. And then there's an additional number. And I guess one of my questions, and I can follow up in writing as I have been with Jonathan, is where, that study adds, I don't know, I think 12,000 back in 2021 for future dam and reservoir. And I don't, it's news to me, and I could be paying attention more, but I'm just curious how the current numbers are arrived at, and if it's just following exactly this Raftelis model, and whether we have some data now, whether it's actually converging or diverging from that model. Like, are we getting these millions of dollars in PIV fees that they estimated in their model, or are the PIV fees too high and nobody is developing? I just don't know, and I'm curious about. And as I said, I'll follow up more in writing, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Cameron. The 3 minutes is up. The BOT can respond if they would like. What is your last name and your affiliation with town for the record, please?
Hi, yeah, my name is Cameron Beebe. My wife and I own a lot. It's a lot 3 Lakeview Heights. And I also own co-own part of with the mining district, one lot down near Wolf Tongue.
Thanks, Cameron. I'm not sure, John, whether answering that question is something we can do now, or it's really more of, based on the rate study kind of question that we can't answer
Yeah.
today.
Cameron was referring to the 2021 rate study, and we'll have that 2025
Okay.
version of it on Friday, and that's got some of the stuff Tanya was just talking about, that there's some that's contemplated there, and then the new rates. And so we did have that meeting on January 21st where you had the presentation for the rate study, and that video is available on our website, as is the packet, which has the presentation about it in there. And so we can have further conversation about this too. I think I think, is there any, I guess the question would be specific questions that we're answering there. And I know Cameron said that he'd follow up in writing too. And we've been having a pretty good conversation, Cameron and myself, about this topic.
Do we have any data about construction and if the PIF fees are indeed supporting the plant, or if they're too high and deterring development, or seems to not have an effect? I mean, like, I know it's hard to quantify that because we wouldn't know what would happen had we not raised our PIF fees. But is there any data from the new study that looked at the past 4 years between the two studies to tell us what they thought?
I'm not sure that correlation is easy to make. And I'm also not sure, I guess the question is, the purpose of the PIF fee is to pay for the impact on the system. And so one of the things to remember is like, if you have, just in simple, like if we had 5 gallons of water coming through the wastewater, and then you add another gallon, and then that triggers a permit change for us that requires a $20 million upgrade. That's why I think that fee is there. And I think, like, looking at it in the other way is a very valid way to do it. But I think what we might want to do, if that's something the board is interested in, is really think about how we measure that, I think, and like what those data points might be. And that might be something that we could put together for you. But I think we just need to figure out what we're looking at. I'm sorry, that's not a very helpful answer.
No, that makes sense. And I think, it is helpful for anybody who's building to think how much it would cost to build a well and a septic system with today's dollars as well. For if you're out of town, that's what you'd have to do, and how much would that cost? So granted, you're not going to have the monthly fees, but anyway, there's no way around it. It's not cheap wherever you're at, so kind of sucks.
Other comments or questions, or John, what specifically?
Well, I think we still have one more.
Have we not answered?
John, or no, Billy, I think we might still have one more public comment.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. We do. Sorry, I had to go to my phone, so I don't have good visibility. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, this is Ron Mitchell.
Ron.
For me personally, unless you have a structured, tiered system, be almost impossible to do a major development, because lenders and investors are going to look at the risk factor from their perspective, and that means what amount of money would have to be put up front in total. And so having to pay PIF fees all at once raises the risk factor to the point of most likely denial if it's all up front. Just thought you'd like to know that.
Thanks, Ron. Appreciate that comment. Any other public comments? Okay. Thanks, everyone. Well, that will bring it back to the discussion and interest.
I think you had said, Mayor Billy, bring it back to discussion. You kind of tapered off there. Is that correct?
I am so sorry. Yeah, I don't know what's up with my phone, but yes, I'd like to bring it back for discussion and answer the questions before the board. I think we were digging into that before public comment, but we need to get through them.
Do other BOT members have comments, thoughts on this?
I feel like all the things have been covered. Appreciate Andrew's input. It was really helpful.
Do you have an opinion or anything on this in terms of how to give direction to John and the team?
To be honest, I feel pretty mixed. Yeah, unfortunately, on the fence is the summary of my position right now. But I guess that means that kind of warrants more investigation. More information can't hurt.
The question before the board is, does the board support exploring alternatives to the current TIF payment schedule?
Yeah, I guess as we've repeated several times over the last few hours, the limited amount of staff resources is a real thing, and does this rise above the urgency priority level to justify more staff hours to investigate? I'm not completely sure it does.
One thing we talked about was putting this to our strategic planning, our work session, and then deciding on the whether and how to prioritize it. Then is that something? That's what I heard earlier. Is that something folks think about, or what do folks think about that idea?
That's what I support.
Yeah, I as well. Like, just hit pause just for a bit. Let's talk about it in strategic planning and decide where we move from there.
Yeah, I could support that as well.
Yeah, I agree as well.
Okay. Tierney, Tanya, and Ty, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I agree.
I said I agree. I think it was me and someone else were talking over each other.
Okay. And
I
Tanya,
think it is important. I agree. I think it is important, and I think we should. I know we don't do it today, but it should come up in the near future because it is that's a lot of money, and if there's ways to make it a little easier on people, I think that we owe it to the community. And then, as Ron said, I mean, for larger projects, in the meantime, until we come up with it, they can come to the board for a tiered payment system. So it's happened before. Since I've been on the board. So.
Thank you, Kanya. Yeah, I like the idea of exploring alternatives, and I think it's better that we table it today and go in our strategic planning, get clear on the things that we want to prioritize it now and later, because there are viable paths now. So I think, how does that, John? You got your guidance?
Thank you. We appreciate your direction. And Cameron, I am still here. I can talk to you about some of those questions you had towards the end, and we can continue. I can tell you a little bit more about that process just so you understand when and how that's happening.
After the meeting there, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yes.
No worries, man. Just wanted to make sure I'm helping you accomplish that. All right. Thank you, everyone. With that, we will take time for public comment on non-agenda items. Is there any public comment on non-agenda items? Don't.
Alex, you've got Alex on.
That's what I thought. Alex, go ahead.
Good evening, all. You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. Alex Zabrick. I'm a resident of Ned. But I just wanted to. I know you get a lot of negative comments, but I've been chatting with John about Big Springs egress as a resident of Big Springs, always top of mind, and advised that there's going to be a public engagement meeting scheduled coming up soon, which I think is great progress, and we encourage that to get scheduled as soon as possible. And also just encouraging the board to continue to prioritize that project and direct town staff to do the same. I know it's been a long process, so I appreciate everyone's attention to continuing to move it forward. And I am on ProSab and always and a member of Big Springs, as I said, and always happy to be a partner on that. But yeah, just wanted to put that bug in your ear, ask it to please get scheduled, and move forward towards hopefully a solution we can all be happy with.
Thanks, Alex. Any other public comment? Oh, Tanya?
Oh, I just want to respond to that. John, do you know when we'll have that scheduled? I know when is JVA going to come make a presentation?
We are going to have a meeting on Monday at 11:15 with JVA to plan that meeting. And we will schedule it hopefully towards the end of May. We just need enough time to have the engagement to get everybody there. And what will likely happen is in the MPP at the community room, it will be like a community forum type event where there'll be presentation on the work that's happened, and then we'll present on where we are and all that kind of thing. And that we're hoping we can do end of May, if at, you know, like right in there. We just got to make sure we get Ned Fire and all the stakeholders there.
Okay, so at end of May-ish.
Yeah.
And then after that meeting, I suppose we could always schedule a walk to show the routes to people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're getting to the point where maybe not today, but soon it will be dryish over there. So
This is gonna go fast. Yeah, it is dry. It's been dry until today.
It was
yeah.
dry until today, so yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. That's great to hear. It's going to be scheduled in the next month or so.
Thanks, Alex. Any other public comment on non-agenda items? All right, hearing none, looking for a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second, Macy?
Mayor Billy,
Yes.
Trustee Miller, he's saying yes, he's muted.
Visual.
Trustee Corvalon,
Yeah.
Trustee Ty,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Sterling,
Yes.
Trustee Maris,
Yes.
and Trustee Larson.
Yes.
Thank you. The meeting is adjourned at 8:42 p.m.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night, all.
Good work tonight.
Bye.
Right.